Hey, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on scaling sales with data-driven sales management with Rev. We're going to get started here in a hot second. We're going to give folks a little bit of time to filter in, and then we'll get started there. I think we'll probably spare you the conversation that Grayson and I were having around optimal work ergonomics.
Really,
That's
that
gonna be
was
the
such a
next
treat,
webinar
though.
we do.
Yeah. That's the best part too.
Yeah, for sure. I just have the Apple Magic Mouse, which I'm sure is the world's worst like ergonomic thing or whatever, but no big deal.
I saw a meme recently of if Apple designed a car and you'd have to turn it over to charge it.
Oh my God. It's the worst. My SDRs were just like, some of my SDRs were just talking about that the other day, but they're like, how in God's name can you have a mouse where like when the battery runs out, you have to turn the damn thing over and then like you can't use the thing. So then you're sitting here like mousing on your machine while anyway, it's just like absolute nonsense. It's ridiculous. Anyway, okay, cool. I think we can get started here. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And this is where I always share the wrong screen and then everyone sees my like heinous inbox, but wonderful. So I am super pumped to have Grayson here today live from Austin, which I am very much looking forward to getting back to after all this pandemic bull honky is done with itself. But Grayson leads sales at Revcom, makers of amazing transcription software and also awesome Atrium customer. He also happens to be a really amazing data-driven sales leader, which is fantastic, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. We'll do a little bit more of an introduction with him here in a hot second, but first and foremost, what we're going to do is just set the table in terms of what we mean when we talk about data-driven sales management. And so one of the metaphors that we like to use to talk about data-driven sales management is to analogize it to a little bit of the massive shift that has happened in professional athletics over the last like decade or so, where data-driven like team management has really become the crux of things. And so of course people may be familiar with this as related to, there was Michael Lewis's book Moneyball and the Oakland Athletics. There was of course a movie about it with Brad Pitt, but the A's were one of the earliest innovators here by using data in order to do a better job of recruiting cheaper players who had amazing metrics, and they could see that they had amazing metrics but didn't look the part, so to speak. And so they were able to generate an advantage by being able to pick out these great players who had amazing metrics and get them on the cheap. And so you can see this here where the A's had, they were substantially more winning than a bunch of other teams. And they were doing that at a substantially cheaper payroll price there. So there's an advantage in using data in order to drive business decisions. And so one of the cool things though, is that once data-driven, always data-driven sort of thing. And there's always a new place where there's an area for optimization. And so the best example there, and can extend the metaphor here in baseball, is that now there's actually in-game changes that happen as a result of data-driven management decisions. The best example of that is teams that shift their players, their defenders, they shift their defenders to different sides of the field based on where the batter has historically hit the ball. So they change their behavior in order to get ahead of a potential problem. In this case, they shift the players substantially in order to be able to get more ground outs and what have you. And it's really helpful because it makes their pitchers more successful. It makes everybody more successful. The point being that like being data driven and using data in order to drive behavioral changes and decisions and modify behavior for the better is something that's very powerful and continues to be powerful. And so then when we think about our like sales land where we all live, oftentimes we don't really have the reputation for being as data driven. It's more like these metaphors, right? Like, hey, all right, we're here to close a deal, as opposed to, oh, this is a science, we're running revenue factories. But the funny thing is that, look, the opportunity is now we have the data available. We have our CRMs, we have the information that's being captured and produced and captured in all these different systems. And so of course, the challenge is that like now what we have to do is help our managers get to the place where they can do this to build that muscle that has historically been lacking. And kind of the two primary reasons why there's shortfalls there is like, one, manager enablement, at least manager data-driven enablement is usually it's an afterthought. Usually enablement goes to reps. And so helping managers get data-driven, there's a training deficit there, which we can surmount. And then the other thing is there's a tooling deficit. And so historically, we've unfortunately tried to enable managers with, here's a wall of charts, go figure out what's going on. And of course, most managers don't come from the finance department, they don't come from the math department, they come from rep land. And so this is a new thing. And so the way that we approach this at Atrium is like we say, hey, we exist to help sales managers use data to improve team performance. We work with really amazing customers in order to do that. Rev, of course, is one of them. We've been blessed to have them with us for multiple years now, through ups and downs and pandemics and what have you. And so that's what we do. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is like how organizations can be more data driven. And so the good news is that we have this amazing high priest of data-driven sales management here today in the form of Grayson. So Grayson, I would love it if you could give a little bit of an introduction to yourself. I think we stole, by the way, Grayson has an amazing blog. We stole this off of your blog, but maybe you can give the audience a little bit of a rundown on yourself, your background, a little bit on Rev, et cetera.
Yeah, my name is Grayson Cooper. I'm the VP of Sales here at Rev.com. Pete doesn't know this, but I graduated from college with a Bachelor of Science in Economics with minors in math and statistics. Oh, with minors in math and statistics? Man, you've done your research. I love data and I value it as a way to make decisions. I think I'll try to encapsulate all the words on the right with some spoken words, but the best part of my job is the opportunity to develop and support and grow the careers and lives of people on the team. It is my role to set up a system that allows people to call forth their best selves, grow as individuals, grow as a team, and win as a team, and win as a company, and hopefully be excited to come to work every day. I think one of the most important pillars to getting that environment or that culture is to have clear goals, clear expectations, and then use data-based decision-making to get better day in, day out, so that you're building to be part of what I consider to be a world-class team. So this topic is super near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, and by the way, I knew that you had that background. A lot of our early adopters that we started working with 3 years ago actually have a lot of those characteristics. The gentleman who's like he's the director of sales, gentleman named Will Ibsen is director of sales at SAS Optics. He's a phenomenal Atrium customer. He did mechanical engineering undergrad. But I think the reality is that, hey, yeah, we've got, there's like early adopter sales nerds, if you will, who have a predilection towards that. But the reality is that this shift is not changing anytime soon. And so that's like really cool that now like the rest of the market is adopting this and coming around and realize this is a really important thing. Little bit on Rev, fun story. When we did customer research for Atrium, this was back in like early 2016, we did 150 customer interviews, right? Sales operations, sales leadership, COOs, CFOs, et cetera. We recorded them all on Camtasia because we did like live conversations, and then we transcribed them all with Rev, every single one. It's amazing. Yeah, I think we spent, and it was back before Rev was like had made the transition being very heavily AI powered. So we've been a Rev customer for a long time, but maybe you can tell folks a little bit about Rev in case it's pertinent to their needs.
Yeah, ultimately Rev's goal is to unlock the power of speech to text for everyone, everywhere. We provide like extremely fast, accurate speech to text powered by robots that are perfected by humans. And we do that in English with humans. And we also do that on the extreme end of Siri on steroids for automatic speech recognition to power tools similar to Gong and Chorus, where you're getting those AI transcripts. We can provide that and analytics on top of that.
Holy mackerel. That's super cool. Yeah, it's so funny. I'll be searching in Google Drive and I'll get like a hit on a Rev transcript from like 2016 on like a customer interview. It'll be like Doug Landis box interview. It's like hilarious. All right, let's talk about some data-driven sales management stuff here. So I think the first question that I would love to put to you, Grayson, is when you think about it, what does it mean to you to be data-driven for managing rep performance, and how has it helped you scale? Specifically, like how do you expect your managers to use data to manage their teams?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes when a coach of any sort, but a coach in a sales is coaching with a rep, they are using the temptation is to say, I've observed these qualitative things that you need to improve upon, like the way that you speak, the warmth, the mirroring,
Sure.
and those things
Sure.
are important. However, what is more important is looking at things like how are they converting through the stages so that you can really diagnose what they're doing that is leading to good or bad outcomes. So if a rep is having a good outcome, it is just as important to know why they're having good outcomes as if they are having bad outcomes in certain areas. And so a great sales manager, a rep, and coach rep and their teams on what are the most important things for that individual, but as the team as a whole. And then they can use that to communicate upwards and say, the leads actually are bad, or the leads are good, but we're mishandling them. That's how I think about the importance of data for a sales manager.
Nice. And then I think when we were talking about this ahead of time, you had talked about the importance of bringing that data into one-on-ones and talking about like how, yeah, experience is a great teacher, but there's got to be shared reality and shared vision there, and how like data kind of underpins that. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. You asked me not to talk too much about Atrium. I'm going to talk a little bit about Atrium because I think it just did change the way that we have done our one-on-ones as a team. Now our one-on-ones, and it's a different cadence for different types of sellers and different reps, but all of our one-on-ones from managers to reps include at some point during the month a look at data to assess the health of their overall pipeline, as well as the effectiveness of their ability to sell. All reps have access to their dashboard for their personal, and they know what their manager is seeing as well as what they're seeing. And that creates what you and I talked about as shared reality. I think most problems exist between people and any relationship in general, but in workplace, especially between lack of shared reality or shared vision. And if the rep and the manager both agree that a shared vision is to attain quota, be a great seller, then they just need to get aligned on what is the shared reality and what does the data say of where I need to be spending my time, where I need to improve, or what do I want to do more if I want to over attain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think as a sales leader myself, and like right now I'm a line manager, I've got AAEs going into me. That's where all my hair went. In case you're wondering, the notion of a shared reality is really impactful because it can really help reps just come to grips with the fact that something is a problem. Because say you got that vision alignment, right? Hey, we want to help you attain, we want to make everybody successful here, but like people are humans, and so if you're noting, hey, I think you have challenges around your opening here, a lot of times the reaction to that can be like, what are you talking about? No, I don't. And there's one way of skinning that cat, which is to like be on a bunch of meetings, what have you, like super time intensive, right? Or listen to a bajillion chorus or gong recordings, again, super time intensive. And of course, sellers are sellers. So they're like, no, it's because these are the variety of leads that came in across the trailing 30 days. But if then you're able to go into the data and be like, look, here's the sitch. Like we got 10 mid-market reps, we look across the trailing 90 days, conversion rate from disco to stage 3. Do you see how you're like half of everybody else? Like, I'm not making this up. Like, I'm not hating on you, but we got to fix this. Right? Oh gosh, I guess that is inarguable. Yeah, it is. So let's stop arguing and let's just fix it. Sound good?
I love what you're talking about. I think of specific examples since I've been a Rev where one seller who salespeople may like to hear themselves speak, and that's a pretty common tendency. But for them, they over shared with a prospect on the line, and they would spend more time speaking than their counterparts. And that resulted in us having conversations like, you speak more. And we can use tools like Gong or conversational intelligence platform and see that they're speaking 70% of the time, while our best sellers or the remaining sellers are speaking closer to 40, 50% of the time. And so we're having conversations about, hey, we need to your talk time go down. We want you listening more. And at first there was met with a lot of resistance. And the way that we were able to talk about that was in aggregate, say, not comparing you to the best rep, we're going to compare you to another rep in general, and we'll show you how your numbers convert by stage and what that results in. And it was really eye-opening for them, and they learned and grew through that, which I think is awesome. Whenever data informs great outcomes for the rep and the team and the company, that's awesome.
Yeah, we had something similar actually. So Atrium now integrates with Gong, and of course we use the heck out of Atrium internally, but we have gong metrics like talk ratio, rep monologue, like longest rep monologue. There's a stat called question rate, which is actually pretty cool. It identifies how many questions are being asked per hour or something. I forget exactly how it's calculated. But what we had was like when we started visualizing these things, we were like, oh wow, a couple of our reps were like super chatterboxes. And so the problem with that is if you're talking, you're not listening. If you're not listening, you're not collecting information from the organization. If you're not collecting information from the organization, you're going to struggle to fit solution cases to pain points because you never gathered the pain points. And so what we did is like, first it was like, holy macaroni, we've got a couple of reps who are way off on this. So then what we need to do is change behavior. And so it's like insufficient to just identify a shortfall. Now you can actually change it. And so the way that we approach that was, as you were pointing out, like, hey, you don't want to set a goal that everybody's got to be Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan of talk ratio or whatever. But instead, it's like kind of baby steps, maybe not baby steps, maybe like toddler steps. And so what we did was we said, hey, look, we're going to set a goal for you guys, you talkathons. I think they were at like 60% talk ratio. You want to be like under 50. Mm-hmm. We're like, we're not going to say, hey, get under 50. Hey, let's get to 55. And so we set up a dashboard on it, it broadcasts to the team, it holds people accountable, but then also the goal is set to. So the software like chirps and is, hey, you're on your way there, or you're not on your way there, right? And it was really cool to see the behavior change, and you can see it dive in the chart and so the good news is it was good because the behavior changed, you had better outcomes. One of the reps backslid a little bit, which was funny. You can see it. It was like teeted back up again. But at least now you're doing that and like we're aware of it. And then you move on to the next coaching thing. Okay, we've got that handled. Let's move on to the next thing. Yeah. So I think one thing I wanted to ask you about is how have you, I think you had talked a little bit about identifying opportunities on a per rep basis to improve win rates. And by like digging into differences, like obviously we were just talking about call execution behaviors or talk time behaviors or what have you. Mm-hmm. What are other ways that you've gone about like raising the individuals by improving their individual, the thing that was not wrong, but like the thing that could most be improved for each of them?
Yeah, I like this question. And as a framework, I think about there's a couple things. There's output and there's efficiency. So how efficiently are you moving things from input to output? And for a seller in an AE closing role, that's how are you doing from opportunity identified, pipeline open to close? Yep. And what is your win rate? And I can think of two reps in my mind who are stylistically very different people. One, they're both great performers, like consistently hitting their numbers. And I'm sure other leaders are going to know this when I say it, but one is working half as hard as the other one, but their numbers look pretty similar. And one is doing more and one's doing better. And then whenever you can kind of marry those two things, the person who is doing more and then starts doing better as well, really starts to has just an absolute really accelerated growth with their ability to sell. And what we look at is stage by stage conversions. So that's been input, output, and then efficiency metrics. So how are they doing at converting things from open to close? And then we use the measurement of stage by stage to help inform us where we think we need coaching at. And at a high level, that can be things the discovery call is their weakest point of the call. And I would argue like that's probably the most important call of the whole entire sales process. But yeah, I'll digress from there. But you can see where people are. You try to measure those things. And if you don't have the measurement, then you really can't coach effectively, because then it's like coaching with your goggles on in a really poor way. I think that example is one of the more salient ones. This is how we coach on individual things. And then it's about discovery, or then it's about how do you do pitch negotiation. Yeah, exactly.
We've had the same thing. The framework I use for this is, or the way we talk about this, it's very similar. We talk about sales success is the result of a high quantity of high quality selling behavior. It's like pretty straightforward. And so you can have, for any given person, their individual critical path could be one of quantity or like level of effort, or it could be a qualitative execution problem. And so a lot of times the way that organizations talk about this is like skill versus will. And I think that's a good framework there. Although I like to think about it as like quality, because like you could have the skill could be there, but like you just don't don't do it for whatever reason because like you forgot. And yeah, and so like we've seen very similar things. Like I'll give a kind of an anecdote here. One of my reps he's great. He previously sold applicant tracking, so ATS software for recruiters. And he worked for one of the like modern ATS providers, Greenhouse, Lever, Workable, et cetera. And so the thing that was his sales behavior was, at least recently, was informed by selling to an HR who are sensitive. Right? You can't be like very upfront with them because they're a little like more reserved. And then the second thing is that their solution was oftentimes replacing an existing solution. There was like JobVite was already there or something was already there. So it was like a renewal coming up. And so the thing with ACE is that like for most organizations, like they don't have something in place in order to help their managers be more data driven. So in our case, like we're creating new budget usually because it's like it's not replacing a thing. And so what that requires is a much more evangelical kind of like you have to drive to a close because there's not a renewal date coming up on some existing solution there. And so you could actually see this in his conversion rates where his opening, he was lower than a lot of the rest of the team. And a really important part of our open is we sell on customer data. And so it's really important for us to be able to, like usually at the end of a first discovery call, we set up a free account for organizations because it takes 5 minutes to turn on Atrium. And so being more forward and forceful around saying, hey, based on the discovery stuff you've said so far, these things seem like something that we can help you with. Let's go ahead and set up a free account for you and we can show you some of these things to tie back to your priorities. He wasn't doing that as well, and you could see it as metrics. And so what we did was we said, hey, we're going to practice on that, like driving to that first close. We call it a data light close. And lo and behold, you can see his conversion rates on that like lifted over the ensuing 90 days. And now he's like way out ahead of the rest of the team there. And it's been very successful. And he loves it because he's, yeah, that's right. Like I have a way higher batting average. And then moreover, because we have a very high win rate, once organizations see their data, they're like, okay, this is sick. I get it. That ultimately drove a lot of like high performance for him after that. So it was a really great, not only was it great for the business, but it was also great for him as a rep standpoint, because like he was really chuffed about it. Cool. So moving on here. Oh, and I think we actually already talked about this. So when you think about goals, how do you approach using goals, like setting goals and managing with them as a mechanism to drive, performance in your team?
Yeah, I love this question, and I think my thinking on this is going to constantly evolve because I think as we get more and better data, the way that we use and think about goals is really important. Now, there's another meta debate around whether we should do goals or create systems of habit, but for the sake of goals and on a sales team, I think that there is the most important ones are what is the number one thing that you're going to be measured by, and that is probably quota attainment for a seller. And then how do we reverse engineer daily and weekly goals to use those as a measuring rod for making sure that in this month or this period, in this quarter, we're building to set ourselves up for future months, periods, quarters, days. And that is, I think getting those three things are probably number one is what you do on a period basis. So whatever your quota a period is, whether it's a quarterly or monthly, and then how do you reverse engineer that into smaller goals that will lead to the right activities to go towards achieving your number. And I think about that as that's probably foundational for a good sales team. If you don't have daily and weekly expectations that you and your managers are talking about to their reps, then there's probably more room for error than you would like in your system. Now, I do think there is in the beginning, you verify everything, and then eventually they gain and garner trust over consistent behavior over time. And then there's rarely a need for trust unless something goes wrong with output. However, what I've seen happen in the past is rep will be great, have an awesome quarter, and then just pull completely off the gas. And you can see it as they're exiting the quarter. It's like you just see them leave the ground and then just stop doing the daily stuff because they're focused on that one good quarter. And it's really about making sure we're always eating our vegetables with the daily stuff.
Yeah, whether it's prospecting or whatever. That is such an extraordinarily common pattern. It's to have somebody who like exits the quarter, especially if they had a big quarter. Because I was talking with the SVP of sales operations, this pretty big company just earlier, and we were joking about how a sales organization is a factory. But the problem is that the like assembly lines are people.
Yeah.
as opposed to machines. And like people are messy and they do silly things like, hey, I just had a massive quarter, so I'm like good to go, and have like recency bias there versus, okay, cool. But if you do that, you're going to be hosed in one deal cycle. So let's
Yeah.
not do that. But humans are really bad at that, which is why A, we need managers, and then B, why we need data in order to inform us on that front. Like a couple examples there. Yeah. Like time appropriate goals is super important. Like weekly, are we putting in the calories? What is our customer facing meeting volume? Maybe if you're higher velocity, what is our new opportunity inflow? Usually for like
Yep.
most AE, like human driven AE motions, like weekly interval of new opportunity inflow is probably a little too tight of a tolerance there. But it might be, but certainly for SDRs, like for opportunity creation, like, yeah, you're supposed to be creating like 8 opportunities a week or 5 opportunities a week or touching this many new accounts or whatever. But then on a monthly standpoint, it's things like certainly new opportunity inflow, certainly things like, do we have, what is our customer, like how many ops are we engaging with? And then also this is where you can start getting into qualitative metrics too, qualitative goals, because now you've got like a sufficient sampling period in order to make good judgments. Maybe not monthly, maybe it's more like quarterly. Hey, what is our win rate? Like we expect to have a win rate of 20% or 25%. And then moreover to that stage conversion stuff, hey, we have an expectation that we're winning, use Atrium as an example. We have an expectation that we win 50% of our deals where data's gotten lit up. Just historically over time, that's been like pretty much the benchmark. And so having that set allows us to then on a cadence come back to them and be like, are we where we need to be? Are we where we need to be?
Yeah.
And the same is true with leading indicators, right? Like obviously that conversion rate is a little bit, it's a qualitative lagging indicator a little bit, but also things like, hey, to your point about someone with a big quarter, one of my reps recently, we were trying to figure out like why he had a bookings like in June. And when we went back and we looked at the data, because I was like, you didn't have a new opportunity inflow problem at all, like just like straight in line with everybody else. But what was weird was that in April, when he was having a really big April, had a bunch of stuff that was down pipe. The opportunities that came into his pipe in April had a very poor conversion rate out of stage 0, we call meeting pending, into disco or beyond, stage 1 plus. You could totally see it in his, we call them stage advancements. It's a different metric. You could see it like everybody else. So his new op inflow was fine. Same with everybody else. And then over time with stage advancements plus disco, you have this in April and we're like, oh man, there's the culprit. Now, unfortunately, like it was too late to solve anything for it because like, so June was June. But what we did is we set a new goal on it. We added a goal, a monthly goal, to in addition to new opportunity inflow, we say, hey, we have an expectation that you have 20 new ops that are coming into your pipe per month. We had a new goal, which was, and we want to see 13 of them getting disco plus. And so now we have that goal in place and it's being monitored for us. And so the good news is we won't have any more of those things for the rest of our reps. And it's been good there. And I'm actually just, the quarter just ended for us. And I just set up a bunch of QBRs for my reps. What I realized was that what we needed to do is we rely on a lot of metrics broadcasts. So like dashboards being broadcast to us, goal alerts being broadcast to us, things like that. But I'm scheduling hour-long metrics review meetings after the first of the month. So I just have it's like micro QBRs, right? Like a forcing function to go back with the rep and be like, hey, let's look at how did we do on our 10 goals for last month, the leading indicators, but also the lagging indicators. And all what this came from was all the results of us like having this issue, which is unfortunate. But ideally what you would do is like you make mistakes once. And so now we have a framework in place in order to prevent us from making that mistake in the future.
That's actually really interesting. I've been talking about this with one of my sales managers, and in the past, whenever I was a frontline manager or earlier at Rev, on a weekly basis, I would show the metrics I thought were most important: number of opportunities created. I had an advancing number like you did as well, and then I had their results, and then activities like phone calls and emails combined into one number. And then I would show red, like stoplight status, green, red, yellow on all those numbers. And recently, that the manager I was speaking with, he was saying, back whenever I was an AE and you were doing this to me, I was like, I need to be, I don't want to be yellow, and then, or I don't want to be red. And then the other, which creates a really interesting incentive. And then they would say that the other reps would message them and say, hey man, I know how it feels to have your number red there. Like, you got this. They'd be like really supportive, which creates like a social network. So I'm actually interested to hear if you do that monthly QBR on a individual or a team basis.
We haven't. So we have metrics review in our team meeting, but yeah, I don't know. I'm of two minds about this because like I'm a little bit like I'm not the Ted Lasso coach. I'm more the Bill Belichick coach, if you will. And so on the one hand, my general predilection is to like, here it is, guys. Here's the game tape. Here it is. If you're red, like it's okay, but we're gonna talk about it. Or sorry, like everyone's gonna see it. All the dirty laundry is gonna be there, because that way, when you're partway through the month and you're tracking there, you're like, oh man, I'm thinking forward to the fact that my dirty laundry is gonna be aired out in in 15 days. I guess I better buckle down. But we don't do a lot of naming and shaming stuff in actually like team meetings. We do one way that we approach that is just to have, what we do is we infuse our organization with data via like lots of email broadcasts of dashboards, lots of email broadcasts of goals, lots of Slack broadcasts. So it's essentially like the digital equivalent of the kind of like dashboard porn that people would put on the walls of their sales organization. They'd be like, hey, look, we've got a dashboard up there. It's, yeah, bro, but nobody ever looks at it. Yeah, but what it does is it shows people that we care about being data driven. And that's actually a beneficial thing where it's like, hey, look, we care about this in our organization and you're going to be held accountable for that. So you just might as well get on the train. The way that we do that is like in a virtualized fashion, which of course is really important in a distributed work environment, by making sure that things are showing up in Slack, in email, etc. Haven't done like the more team metrics review there, but sorry, at least the negative stuff. But it's an interesting question for sure. On the manager thing that you were mentioning there, I think there's an interesting thing when you have people who are essentially reps who become managers, and they have this like transition where they're like, I used to be a rep, I was focused on closing deals, and maybe I was a little grumped at you, Grayson, when you would hold me to account on these metrics. But now I totally get it, because I've got 8 people I'm responsible for, and I can't, like, there's no way I can keep everybody in my brain. What do you do with junior managers in order to help accelerate that transition, right? The metamorphosis.
I love that. And one of my favorite things to do is take a new manager who is managing any team, but sit them down and have them go through data together and ask them, what are your observations about this data? And then I'll get them in the practice of looking at data in the way that I look at the data to help inform me where coaching opportunities are. And so we're like going through that live, and I'm saying, well, here's a trend on this one rep. What do you think the problem is here? And some reps like know intuitively, but a lot of them would say they just need to get better. Like, they need to get better at it. So what are the reasons why they're not converting opportunities? Like, help dig into that more. And we're doing that on a real-time basis in person. I think that's like the most effective way. And then once those training wheels are put in place, they can then ride the bike. And then they're bringing things to me and saying, I'm looking at this data in this way for this rep. Do you also agree that this is the biggest problem? Or do you think it's something else? And so then they're getting in. I want all my managers to get in the process, and really everyone on the team to get in the process of hypothesis, test hypothesis, what's a conclusion, new hypothesis. And then that's the process in which it should go. And so when we look at something together in a one-on-one setting and we're looking at data, what are you seeing here? Use this to inform a hypothesis, and then let's talk about that. And that comes from a high place of trust. The whole time I'm like, there's no wrong answer. It's okay to be wrong. I'm going to be wrong a lot, but we're going to put hypotheses out there, and then we're going to challenge each other. And it's not us at each other. It's like us together talking about the overall objective. That's probably the most effective way that I've seen new managers ramp up quickly, is to have a lot of one-on-one time with someone who's been there in a way that they are not telling. They are creating an environment for open discussion.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, the big challenges, the big issues that we see with new managers in our customer base is either A, or in our prospect base is reps who are going from being a rep to being a manager and have a little bit of that like management by metrics hesitancy because they've historically, like maybe they had a manager who was like potentially a bad manager who used management by metric for like, all right, you need to call more, which sometimes people do have to need to call more. But like that was only only the ever the only answer. And then the second thing they have is, and this kind of goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier about like manager enablement, is that as a rep, what you do is you close deals, right?
Yeah.
And so without changing your frame of reference and being trained, they're like, hey, look, that's great as a rep, but now you have 8 reps you're responsible for. You can't close deal. Like you can't be the super rep helping each person close deals or just let me just take over this deal. That's not high leverage. What's higher leverage is managing by a metric and seeing where the shortfalls are to improve the behavior such that now, rather than trying to like close this one deal because this rep can't close, guess what? He's going to continue to not be able to close. So you're going to have to be on all of his meetings unless we can solve that behavioral problem, in which case now all of his ops will be managed better, right? It's the quantity and quality thing. And so helping new managers understand that like the only way of being able to do this successfully is to get leverage, and the only way to get leverage is via management by metric. That's like a very okay, God.
Yep.
And Nick Saban's not carrying the ball. Bill Belichick's not carrying the ball. Steve Kerr is not shooting the hoops for people. Like they're finding the shortfalls, they're improving the individuals, and the way that they're doing that, of course, in these various organizations is via metric. And oftentimes they get that. And I like what you're talking about, and then show them how. Oh, okay, I get this. Cool. Now let's do a test case.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the stuff we're talking about up here, which is helping managers, teaching them how to do that, but also giving them the right like tooling in order to support that. Cool. So I think we had just a couple of questions here since we've kind of gotten through like the meat of what we wanted to talk about here. I think we have time for a question or two. There's a question here that showed up, which is how frequently are you holding one-on-ones? And like what is involved in those one-on-ones, and are they the same as deal review, or are they distinct from deal review? What's the situation there?
Those two things are, so cadence is once a week. I think that newer AEs, especially, or early in their career at the company or early in their career in general, needs to be on a high cadence. So that you're reducing the time between changes that need to take. In those one-on-ones, I would say I like to think of one-on-ones as their time where they can bring up things. However, it needs to be through the lens of, let's make sure we're looking at the shared reality of what is the weekly metrics that we hold you accountable to: number of ops created, total dollar value of pipeline created, ops progressed, those types of things, activity. And if there's issues with those, then that's the stopping point to say, hey rep, I know this is your time, but you're not doing what the expectations are. Why are we not aligned with on these things? And if sometimes it's look, I've got out 7 DocuSigns and I'm like trying to close them, and it just takes a little more time. And that's a good reason. And then if they're already over their number, maybe they're setting themselves up for next month or what have you. But the point of those one-on-ones are to like have that shared reality moment, and then talk about what is the longer vision, and then also have the rep be able to ask for things like help. Deal review can happen in a one-on-one if that is what the rep needs their time for. Say, hey, Grayson, I need you to review this call prior to our one-on-one. In our one-on-one, I want to discuss like what I could have done better. That's one example. But we also have a structural deal review where it is in the AE team meeting, they are reviewing a call. And what we like to do is we take a call that someone's said we can put up there, and then we go through it, and the prospect says something, and they'll pause and say, what should Noah's next response be? And then we're all talking about it live. We're creating hypotheses about how to handle this call. And then we see what Noah actually said. And then we pause after the prospect, and then we talk about and that's really, as long as the rep feels comfortable about that, I think that's a really good way to learn, because the group learns together, and the rep also has the opportunity to be like, wow, I've heard this from all my peers, not just my manager around what needs to change, or wow, my other reps think I'm doing the right thing. That's great. And that's also a good sense of getting wins, right? If they handle the call, it's no, you are absolutely crushing that call. That was such a good call. I couldn't have done it better.
Yeah.
So,
I think the way that we handle that is one of the phrases that I like to use in our organization is that calendar is destiny. And so essentially what you can do is you can encode a operating rhythm into kind of like a series of recurring meetings that have supporting documentation or have supporting metrics and what have you. And so in our case, the way that we do this for individuals is we have a every other week recurring one-on. It's like professional development and performance centric one-on-one. It's half hour. We have a weekly half-hour deal strategy meeting. And so and the reason why we do that is such that the one-on-one, like it's the space for professional development. It's the space for skill discussion and progress on skills and what have you. And then the deal strategy it's not like a pipe review. It's more like, hey, these are the 3 or 4 deals, because it's a half hour, so you can't like talk about too much. These are the 3, 4, 5 deals that I want to talk about and kind of identify, like I'm stuck here. Who should I talk to next? Here's the objections. Here's whatever is going on. And then what comes out of that, of course, is like action items that the rep executes or I execute or what have you. And then, of course, we have a weekly communal deal review, which is not deep like that. It's more just what's the close date, what's the amount, what's the next step, what's the forecast category, and it's essentially like group accountability. And it's just like a forcing, like it's an hour and a half. It's on Wednesday afternoon, like late afternoon, outside of selling hours. And so what that does is it's like a forcing function for AEs to be able to clean their pipe, make sure close dates are good, make sure amounts are good, make sure the stages are good, like catch like that hygiene cruft that shows up throughout the week. So that's how our operating rhythm. And then importantly, like in those one-on-ones, the one like professional development skill one-on-ones, we actually have what we call like coaching dashboards for those, because there's a topic that we're dealing with. Like I gave their example earlier of a rep, one of my reps who had that problem with opening. So we started out and that was like everything in that coaching dashboard is like a couple different tiles. It was an Atrium of here's your conversion rate to data light from new opportunity ownership. Here's how many data lights that you've been getting. Here's how many new ops are coming in. Here's how many data lights you're getting out of it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
And then that's different than this rep over here. And this rep over here we're working on pipe hygiene with him because he carries he lights up a lot of data, but then he's a little messy. And so the tiles on his one-on-one coaching dashboard are untouched opportunities and stuck ops and like total ops in pipe. And it's, oh, look at that. You have 30% more ops in pipe than everybody else. But look, there's 20 of them are untouched. Hey, let's go ahead and calendar an hour. What do you think? I guess I should. Okay, great. So those are and like that's the mechanism by which we bring data into those one-on-ones that are tied to the specific coaching thing that we're trying to improve. And then once that problem is fixed, we actually just swap out the tiles. We're like, all right, that's problem's fixed. Or actually we don't swap them out. We just push them down because we want to make sure that they don't backslide. So that's kind of how we approach that. Cool, man. I think we're almost out of time here. Grayson, this was super awesome. If folks are interested in getting in touch with us, I think we're both easy to find on LinkedIn and also Twitter. If people are interested in more of the content, like we have a variety of other webinars that are like this with some of our other wonderful customers. And again, a thing to note is that Atrium is extremely easy. You just turn it on. It takes 5 minutes to set up, just connect it to your CRM, and like all of a sudden you're going to have really great insights that are coming out of it. And I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me. It was super fantastic. And I'm looking forward to seeing you the next time I'm in Austin, okay?
Yeah, great to see you. Great to talk with you. It's always a joy.
Yeah, cool, man. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.